Thank you very much, Chancellor. And it is for me a real delight to be able to be part of your celebration of 125 years, a great anniversary to mark. And as the Chancellor has just said, the year 1862 was remarkable for many different reasons. The passage of the Morrill Act, which we're also going to be celebrating in this seminar this afternoon. But it was also just a few months before the Morrill Act was signed into law that another institution was created, and that was the Department of Agriculture. So while you have been celebrating your 125th anniversary of North Carolina State University, we have been celebrating 150 years of the department and have had the opportunity this summer to partner with all of the land-grant universities in celebrating 150 years of the land-grant universities. We held with the Smithsonian Institution and the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities an event on the Mall in July, in which there were more than 17 universities that accepted the invitation to have a display on the Mall in our nation's capital and to demonstrate what's new at land-grant universities and what the future is for land-grant universities. And it was an opportunity as well for close to, well, I think it was 750,000 people to come through and to visit those exhibits. So 1862 was definitely a very busy year, and I'm particularly happy to have the opportunity to celebrate the significance and the success of the Morrill Act with all of you as part of your celebration of your 125th anniversary. The Morrill Act created a framework for partnership between the federal government and the states in support of higher education. And that partnership has proven to be an incredibly vital asset to our country, and one that I don't think is looked at in exactly that way. So in marking the anniversary of the Morrill Act, President Obama issued a proclamation in July of this year, and I'd like to quote to you from that. He said, "For more than a century, land-grant institutions have helped bring a college education within reach for more Americans and empowered students with the tools that they need to get ahead. They have fueled groundbreaking research that has moved our country forward, and they have partnered with rural communities to develop robust solutions to the challenges they face. Today, land-grant colleges and universities continue to advance these critical missions by embracing the commitment to equal opportunity and daring innovation that inspired their founding 150 years ago." And I really like that juxtaposition of the commitment to equal opportunity and daring innovation as providing some insights into the pathways that we should be thinking about taking forward. The Morrill Act provided a grant to each state, a grant of land, and the proceeds from the sale of that land were to be matched by the states for the purpose of creating a college in each state to make a liberal and a practical college education available to everyone. Agriculture and mechanical arts were to be part of the curriculum, and they were to have a problem-solving orientation in these new colleges. They were also supposed to provide a liberal education, classical studies, science, as well as military tactics. And 28 years later, in 1890, a second Morrill Act extended these authorities to historically Black colleges, and more recently in 1994 to tribal colleges. If you look at our history of growth since 1862 and prosperity in our country, I think that can be traced in no small measure to the dedication of the land-grant universities to learning, discovery, and engagement, as implemented through undergraduate and graduate education, a real focus on problem-solving research, as well as a dedication to lifelong learning through cooperative extension programs. And if you look at the challenges that are facing our country today, that are facing our world, they're problems that also take that kind of practical problem-solving approach. They're problems that are related to population and the growth in our population. Will we have enough food? Where are we going to get the energy to drive our civilization? And we're concerned about the environment and natural resources, as well as the health of our populations. So these problems, some of them were common in 1862. Some of them were not viewed as being that great a challenge. But we have this constellation of challenges. They're different in scope, but they're no less daunting than what was facing America in 1862. Today, we in USDA are really refocusing our whole program activities to address these grand societal challenges of how do we feed ourselves as well as a growing world population. How are we going to deal with climate change and the vagaries that that is going to bring? How do we ensure the health of generations to come? And how are we going to build a bioeconomy? We have taken these grand challenges and reoriented our research programs to focus on 5 areas. The first is food security, both domestic and international. And it's within the food security priority area that our traditional programs of crop and livestock production are addressed. But we're also, in that orientation, trying to figure out as well how we can be partnering with scientists in other countries to make sure that the research that we're doing addresses not only our issues here, but also those that are facing them in their countries, and also providing for educational opportunities for students here as well as in those countries, to educate a workforce that's going to be concentrating on sustainably intensifying agricultural production. The second priority area is food safety, because it's not enough just to produce enough food. That food has to be safe in order to have a healthy population. The third priority is human nutrition, with an emphasis on lifelong good health. And again, it's not enough to produce enough food. It's not enough that it be safe, but it also has to be food in the right proportions that is going to promote lifelong health. Our fourth priority area is in the bioeconomy. And we very much see that we have to be looking to the products of agriculture as the source not only of biofuels, but also the chemical feedstocks for the production of many other different kinds of products in addition to biofuels. And that our role within our research portfolio is to focus on the development of sustainable systems for those feedstocks, and in a way that is not going to compete with the food production, but is going to enable us to meet both of those demands on our food system. The final priority is climate change, and it is going to be a challenge to meet for all of the other priority areas. But we're focusing our efforts on, first of all, understanding what the dimensions of climate change are and how they will be affecting agricultural systems. Secondly, to develop resilience within our cropping and animal systems of agriculture and adaptation to climate change. And then thirdly, looking at how agricultural systems can function to help to mitigate aspects of climate change. So these priorities are guiding the research that we are doing in our intramural labs and that we are supporting through our extramural programs. And each one of these priorities is a complex challenge in and of itself. And it also will require multifaceted approaches. And in my role as chief scientist and undersecretary, my principal responsibilities are to provide overall direction and coordination for these various programs in science and in our education portfolio, which includes the 4 agencies that Chancellor Woodson mentioned in the introduction. The one that's of greatest interest to this audience is probably the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, that provides funding through capacity funds to the experiment station and to the extension programs here and at the land-grant universities across the country, and also provides competitive grant funding oriented towards these priority areas, as well as to foundational science in agriculture. The other 3 agencies are the intramural agency, the Agricultural Research Service, that we are looking increasingly to provide infrastructure support and to partner with faculty in university settings. The Economics Research Service, as its name implies, does economic research, a lot of that going to inform program and policy decisions of the department. It's been interesting, this being a Farm Bill year, that virtually every single analysis that has been done and provided to the Congress for the Farm Bill has quoted ERS research, referenced it, cited it, and maybe agreed or maybe disagreed, but they do play an important role in that type of economic research and analysis. And the final of the 4 agencies is the National Agricultural Statistics Service that provides the Census of Agriculture that's conducted every 5 years, as well as literally hundreds of surveys that are conducted at the state and the national level that provide important information on agricultural production, that drive many market decisions, but that also play a very important role in providing data that also inform program and policy decisions. But I'm not here to talk about USDA. I really am here today to talk about the Morrill Act and also the way forward that we see. So 150 years ago, this historic partnership between the Department of Agriculture and the states and the land-grant universities began supporting American higher education. That legislation created an agreement between the federal government and the states. It opened the doors of higher education to literally millions of students over the generations here in the United States. And the land-grant university system was really built on this unprecedented partnership between the federal government and the states that has paid some huge dividends to American agriculture in particular, but the American economy overall and the American people. Since the formation of the land-grant university system, our schools have graduated more than 20 million students, produced countless scientific breakthroughs, and provided leaders to communities. The remarkable discoveries and innovations that began in these public universities have been shared with Americans' farmers and ranchers and the public at large through cooperative extension that provides, practical solutions to real-life problems, best practices and techniques to farmers and ranchers, improved community and family life and human health and food safety. And those practices and techniques have made American agriculture and our food system among the most productive in the world. Not only do we not worry about shortages of food here in the United States, our American families pay a far smaller proportion of their income for food than any other nation in the world. And the world has really looked to the United States as being the source of new innovations in agriculture and food processing that they have adopted. So that's a really remarkable contribution that land-grant universities have made to the lives of people, not only here in the United States, but around the globe. But we have some looming challenges, and they're on the horizon. They're ones that I'm sure this audience is familiar with and have heard before. The expected population growth by mid-century to over 9 billion people. The fact that the land that we have available for agriculture is finite, and from a recent FAO estimate, a quarter of agricultural lands are severely degraded. We also have limited water available, and agriculture is the biggest user of water. All of this have led many in the agricultural sciences to the conclusion that what we need to be concentrating our efforts on is the sustainable intensification of agricultural production. Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that in order to meet those food demands by mid-century, we're going to have to increase agricultural production by 70% on essentially no more land than is currently available. Another way of thinking about this challenge is that between now and mid-century, we're going to have to raise as much food in that 35 to 40-year period of time than humanity has produced in all of recorded history. And we're going to have to continue to do that for every year beyond. So it's a huge, huge challenge. Now, part of it can be met by making sure that we don't lose and waste food. There's also estimates that around the world, somewhere between 30 to 40% of food that's produced is lost or wasted. And if we could work on that side of the equation as well, that amount of additional food that needs to be produced could be lessened substantially. But it's also, being at a university, worthwhile considering that it's the students that are here today who are the ones who are going to have to be working on this project for all of their careers. This is going to be a huge, huge mission for the students here at NC State and at every other university with agricultural programs. So it's crucial that we keep the educational pipeline filled with students getting the education needed to be that scientific workforce, the researchers, the agricultural professionals, the skilled farmers, as well as the ones who are going to be making the policy decisions to make sure that we're going to be able to keep moving in the right directions. We at USDA can provide some help through the partnership that we have. We do provide for undergraduate and graduate scholarships and postdoctoral fellowships. We provide grants for curriculum development to help you faculty develop new approaches towards higher education. But we also need to recognize that the United States is already falling behind in the number of students graduating with degrees in the agricultural sciences. The statistics reveal that there's been no real growth in graduate enrollment or degrees awarded in the agricultural disciplines for the last few decades, and only limited growth in some of the allied professions such as family and consumer sciences, human sciences, forestry, and natural resources. We at the department are committed to developing the sharpest minds to strengthen our agricultural science community, but we can't blur Justin Morrill's vision, preventing the production of an educated population that is not only useful here in North Carolina, but around the world. USDA will continue to be your partner to fund land-grant universities like yours to support agricultural experiment stations and cooperative extension, as well as partnering in the undergraduate pipeline. We have every reason to embrace, to engage, and to celebrate the partnership that's made modern agriculture productive and profitable. But as we celebrate 150 years of the land-grant university system, we need to do more than reflect on how well this partnership has served us. We need to renew, we need to reinforce, and to reinvigorate the partnership, and then some. We need to reinvent and reimagine what a research and development partnership between the states and the federal government that was established in the 19th century would look like if we were to create it today. I think it would look different, would have some of the same elements, but it would look different. And I think this is going to be an important dialogue for the land-grant universities and the states and the federal government to have as we face into what are some very significant budget challenges for the United States. President Obama has asked us to out-educate the world, emphasizing the importance of increasing attention and participation in the STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The foundation needed to go forward into science-related careers. And just this past July, the president issued a plan to create a national science, math, technology, and engineering master teacher corps. The STEM Master Teacher Corps is going to begin in 50 locations across the country with 50 exceptional STEM educators, and over the next 4 years, the Corps will expand to include 10,000 of the best STEM teachers in the nation. The president said that if America is going to compete for the jobs and industries of tomorrow, we need to make sure our children are getting the best education possible. And teachers matter, and great teachers deserve our support. We at USDA are doing our part to reach this goal. We've recently completed an analysis of our own educational portfolio across the entire department and identified that we are investing more than $90 million a year toward STEM education. But support to educate this next generation is just the beginning of our hopes for the future. Today, the food and agriculture economy is a huge engine for our country's economy, helping to support 1 in 12 jobs in the country. And while many sectors of our economy are running trade deficits, American agriculture has enjoyed a trade surplus for nearly 50 years. We often hear from the private sector that they don't have the workforce needed in the food and agricultural companies, meaning that there are jobs that are going unfilled in some of these critical companies for the growth of our economy. And there are growing fields with good-paying jobs that more and more require strong backgrounds in STEM education. Local businesses also tell me that they're struggling to find labor that's properly trained for the high-tech environment. And we need to continue training the best and brightest from across the country to be the food and ag science innovators of the future, just as you are doing here at NC State. So at every turn and every partnership, our science agencies within the department are, I believe, delivering on our mission to help ensure a healthy, productive, safe, and sustainable food and agricultural system while protecting our precious natural and human resources. The research that we do in conjunction with university-based faculty and students has a proven record of success. And now more than ever, I think our policies need to be as well informed by science and be evidence-based and performance-based. A robust public food and agricultural research system is our best resource for ensuring that our food system delivers the healthy diet that we want and we expect. So last month, I had the opportunity to travel to a meeting in Guadalajara, Mexico, with the chief scientists for agriculture of the G20 countries. It was the first time ever that such a meeting of agricultural chief scientists had been held. And we had a wide-ranging set of discussions. Through that, I got to see firsthand that collaboration and cooperation are ultimately going to help decision makers in government, in companies, and more importantly, in the heartland, our farmers, access and effectively use new forms of critical agricultural knowledge, information, and technology. And we agreed in this meeting that we needed to focus our efforts on 5 global research collaboration platforms that would provide open access to scholarly publications that are the result of government investments in research, open access to germplasm collections that are so important for plant breeders as well as for genetics and genomics research, open access to genetics and genomics data, as well as other data sets that are critically important for scientists, whether it's soils or land use or weather data. We also, as a 4th platform, recognize that we have to put more emphasis on technology transfer that includes extension approaches, but modernized and adapted to the conditions in different countries, as well as helping other countries to build the private sector that will be producing for those countries the new seed and the other agricultural services that are important for the countries. And finally, we recognize that we also need much greater improvements in the agricultural statistics that are produced by the countries who are participating in this meeting, that included the developing world as well as the G8 countries. We're not going to be able to measure our progress in sustainably intensifying agricultural production unless we've got some reasonably good data on what's being produced. So we really need an improvement in the country's capacities to generate agricultural statistics. And we also agreed that as chief scientists, we needed a venue where we could meet and where we could evaluate the various research projects that we have entered into in global collaborations and the work that we're supporting as well through the CG system. So there are a lot of multilateral as well as bilateral scientific projects that are ongoing, and certainly the very important work of the CG Center that would help us decide where to be putting our research investments for the future, as well as what the priorities should be. I'm telling you about this recent meeting because I think it reflects the new ways that agricultural science is being done. The recognition that we're in the age of big data, as well as big projects in the agricultural domain. And it also recognizes that the importance now that ag science has on the international agenda, that there is the commitment on the part of the G8 ag ministers and the G20 ag ministers, as well as the presidents, to these very important questions of how are we going to be able to sustainably intensify agricultural production and the role that science has got to play. So yes, the challenges that we're facing are different from the ones in 1862. They're very daunting, but we have new tools and the recognition of the importance of agricultural science at the highest levels of government. The president also said in that proclamation that he signed to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the land-grant universities, that generations of Americans have led richer, more productive lives as beneficiaries of the land-grant university system. As we commemorate this historic anniversary, let us reaffirm our support for these institutions of higher learning that help America fulfill its great promise as a nation. We've accomplished a lot in 150 years, but there's a whole lot more work to be done. And as we reflect on the successes that the Morrill Act has had in our communities, in our country, and in the world, I think we need to collectively remain focused on the pathway ahead. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of your celebration. Thank you all for your leadership in the food and agricultural sciences. And I wish you a brilliant next 125 years. Thank you.